is maybe run through a common challenge that you have seen in the work that you do come up with each specific type, knowing that this is not the only problem, that this is not everyone will have this problem, right? But just some common tendencies, kind of just for fun. And then I also do think that this might be helpful and maybe start us thinking about both of ourselves and then better understanding others, maybe asking better questions, having that additional insight. So are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So we'll start with our type ones who are striving to be perfect. I know that they have a focus a lot of time on doing the right thing, a lot of structure, a lot of routine. Where might a type one run into a relationship challenge?
So I actually currently have 2 type 1 clients, and not to sound stereotypical, but type 1s really are heavily focused on what's right and wrong and organization. And a lot of their issues, whether it be in relationships or in their career, right, in their workplace, is the same thing. It's learning, okay, not everything is going to go according to plan. Not everything is going to be black and white. Let's find the gray, what's okay, right? Instead of looking at how can this be perfect, sort of reframe that to how can this be good enough for now?
So good. Okay. What about the type 2 who's really striving to feel connected and loved and appreciated? Where might they run into some issues in their relationships?
Oh, type 2s. They're so giving and just so full of love, right? So the beauty of that is that there will always be there for you, right? Help out. They're great at just being there for you and loving on you. And also, one of the challenges can be is that if that doesn't come back to them, then they can feel slighted, right? Like it's almost then they will go above and beyond and do a little bit extra to see if maybe then you're going to reciprocate the love. And then if that doesn't happen, then they can get really deflated and, not feel their best because what they thought didn't return. So it's just to keep that in mind, that make sure when you're giving all the love and you're being there for other people, that it's coming just from your heart, from that genuine place, and not because you necessarily want something back.
Okay, my boyfriend is a type 2, and it's just been really interesting how he's gotten into the Enneagram, and it's given us this language to like say what we need or like what the problem is. And one of the things that he has coined with that energy is like giving with hooks and just like checking in, like, am I giving to get, like you're saying, or is this truly just like giving unattached? Okay, so our type 3s are driven towards this want to feel outstanding and successful and accomplished. And I think we can all fall into like workaholism, but 3s especially kind of get that stereotypical rap for being hard workers, working always working, because they're driving towards that. So I could see how that could be a problem if you're in a relationship. Do you see that a lot? What would you say to somebody who is kind of dealing with that, maybe as the person, or maybe in a relationship with somebody like that?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that they can ask themselves is if they're going to take on another project, or if they want to stay later at work, right? Something simple that they can ask themselves is, am I neglecting family? Or am I neglecting my home, right? If I want to do this extra thing, or if I want to stay up working late, right? Is this going to take away from my family? Because a lot of times the 3s can have sort of horse blinders on when it comes to work, and they will just go, 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 go. And then it's not at the end of the day that they feel exhausted and overwhelmed. And then at the same time realize, wait, I spent no time with people that I genuinely actually love and care about. So it's checking with that of where am I possibly neglecting if I take this on top of everything else that I've got.
Good. Okay. So we have our 4s who are striving to feel unique and significant. And I have some thoughts on this, but I would love to hear, like, do you see a common communication challenge, relationship challenge with our type 4s? And if so, what is that?
Yes, I think for me, I find 2 things. One, and again, this might sound hard or harsh, but they really, because they can easily sit with their emotions, a lot of it can fester and become all about them. So it can be easier for a 4 to live in their worlds and in their hearts and their minds of all the sort of things that are bothering them and then end up weighing them down. And that kind of segues into, watching movies or listening to music that's so emotionally charged. And that can really disconnect them sometimes from the reality of their work and their home life. So it's just that delicate balance of loving that a 4 can feel their feelings and have no problems with it. That helps them navigate really what they want to do in terms of goals and their desires and their home life. But just making sure to check in that it doesn't become wrapped up into who you are versus what you're feeling.
So good. Okay. And then what I will also say, like I have a 4 in my family as well. And so just even what you're saying, I think is maybe you don't have a significant other, maybe you're, or maybe that's great, but there's, family challenges or friend issue. I just am finding all of this like so insightful and helpful for really any type of relationship, better understanding where that person is coming from. Okay, Natalia, what about our type 5s who are known as the observer, the investigator, really wanting to feel like capable and competent, really focused on being self-sufficient? Where might they run into a challenge? And I know your husband is this one, so you probably have some personal stories for us.
How long is this podcast?
Yeah.
So, I think with them, the biggest thing would be to step out, learn, right? Learn, try to step out of being in your mind and more into how you're feeling. And it's easy for a 5 to say, I don't know how I feel, and just leave it at that, versus really taking the time to sit with something to tap into how they're feeling. Because when it comes to work, that was lightning. I don't know if you heard that, but so they're very good at researching for, their jobs and their hobbies and the things that they're interested in, right? Great at that. They will spend all their time on that. And then when it comes to interpersonal relationships, they sort of check out, right? Not so much effort can be put into trying to get to the bottom of what the problem is, right? So they'll just check out mentally and they'll neglect what they're feeling. So I think for them, it would be to try harder at paying attention to how you're feeling and not so much of what you're trying to rationalize with your mind.
Okay. And then our type 6s wanting to feel safe and secure and supported, where might they run into challenges in a relationship?
Oh, just not knowing what to do. The type, and I've had a couple of clients that is their number one go-to line. I don't know what to do. And I say, yes, you do. And so then we will go back and forth. It's their inner knowing that they don't want to trust, right? Because they have that need for support and guidance. So it's almost as if no matter what they choose, they're not going to win. The outcome won't come out good. And so for 6s is always to remember, let's say you have plan A and a plan B, you're always going to be losing one thing. So if you choose option A, great, but you've lost out on option B. And if you've chose option B, you've just lost out on option A. So either way, it doesn't matter which way you go, because you're never going to know 100% that you can do both, because you can't. So just tap into knowing that whatever it is that you want to do, you do know, and you don't really need anybody else's support.
All right. So then we have our 7s who we have talked about a lot already, but for those of us who are striving to feel satisfied and excited and constantly stimulated and happy, where might somebody like that run into some relationship challenges?
Again, how long is this podcast? Thinking for a lot of 7s that everything should be roses and daisies all the time. And if it's not, then there's a problem. What's going on, right? That feeling of being unsettled, like this isn't it. There has to be more. There has to be something different. Why is it just this way? And I think it's really important to, again, bring it back to, it's not about them. It's not the relationship as a whole. Now, granted, there are some, situations, I'm not saying it's a blanket for all, that relationship maybe shouldn't work, right? There are those cases, but for the most part, it's remembering you can be okay and happy in your relationship. You don't have to jump ship because there are bumps in the road. It's learning to tap into the 5 energy and being happy with what is right now, because this too will pass.
You know, 7s get that reputation for being like the happiest, most positive. And I actually was in a conversation with somebody else who does a lot of work with the Enneagram, and they said 7s are probably the most likely to be depressed out of all on the Enneagram, which you wouldn't expect, because they have such a high bar for satisfaction and happiness that is just almost unreachable. And so they're constantly disappointed.
Absolutely. It's unattainable almost.
Yeah, that's the word, unattainable. Yeah. Okay. So our type 8s are striving to feel strong and powerful. Where might they run into some challenges in their relationships?
So this is kind of like, I forgot what that analogy is. A double-ended sword. That's not what it is.
Double-edged. Yeah.
Double-edged. So the directness is a big one for an 8. And I think it's really helpful to know, maybe not necessarily what Enneagram type your partner is, but what their soft center is, what really triggers them, because it's easy for an 8 to just go right there because they can be direct. And for the most part, they are right in what they're saying, and what they're saying is accurate. But to just keep in mind that not everyone appreciates that bluntness, that honesty, that, you know, it's to have a little bit more tact when you're sharing things. And it's not about dimming your assertiveness. It's just being mindful that not everyone takes it as easy and as direct in the positive way that an 8 usually means it for.
Okay. And then our type 9s, who may actually be on the opposite end of that spectrum, where maybe they find defensiveness, or not defensiveness, directness offensive, like you were saying. But our 9s are really striving to feel at peace and everybody to be getting along and just kind of this overall harmony. Where do they run into problems in a relationship?
So that's interesting. I have a type 9 client now, male, and one of the things that he says so much out loud is, you know, I'm just go with the flow. I like things to be easy and just chill and go with the flow. However, underneath all of that boils the anger that he has, the frustration that he has in the relationship. And so instead of working towards the issue and saying what they need, right? Letting themselves be heard. Instead of doing that, to avoid really boiling up to the point of no return, and then everything erupts like in a volcano, instead of getting to that point, it's helpful for 9s to remember, I have a voice too, I can be heard. And this sort of conflict that may or may not occur if I voice my opinion, like nothing is going to go wrong. A little bit of conflict, a little disagreement, doesn't hurt anybody. What's more important is for 9 to be heard so that they can feel comfortable continuing feeling relaxed and easy without harboring sort of that anger and resentment.
And then what would you say, like understanding somebody's core motives and core fears, I think is like just eye-opening, which is the basics of the Enneagram. Is there any other pieces of the Enneagram that you find to be really helpful in these kind of communication, relationship challenges?
Yeah, I would say knowing if somebody moves, looks to the future, or if someone focuses on the past, or if someone's stuck in the present. I think that is very, very helpful for issues that come up in relationships that are ordinary and everyday. If you're planning a vacation, for example, someone like a 7, we look forward to that because our focus is on the future. So we get excitement out of that. Someone who is focused in the present might not jump on board with you in planning all these things in the future, because that's just not their cup of tea. They're more focused on, let's figure out what we're doing right now. And then with some research and some time, we can plan forward. So I think that is just a quick example, but it's really helpful in the everyday sort of way of life in relationships to know if someone is focused in the future, if they're focused right now, or if they're heavily focused on what's happening in the past. And you'll know that if someone brings up a lot of things from the past into the relationships, that's where their mind usually tends to focus on.
Okay. I have a personal question. And if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to, we'll edit it out. But where do you see, kind of looking at this question through the lens of the Enneagram, where have you seen you and your husband as a 5, you as a 7 have the most growth? Like how have you used the Enneagram to grow in a specific way together?
Oh my gosh. So he has.
That's okay. We have dogs on this podcast. We have Alexa, we have thunder. Like it's all okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So he's really grounded me. It's one of the things for 7s I feel is to have both feet on the ground at all times, right? So we don't like fly away with all of our ideas and thoughts. And one of the biggest growths for me in my marriage and in him being a 5 is knowing that I can have an argument. We can disagree. It doesn't mean anything about the relationship. Doesn't mean I made the wrong choice. It doesn't mean that there's something better out there. It doesn't mean that we need to be fixing things all the time. No, it's 2 people that are having a disagreement, and that's okay. And it's really helped me settle in as a 7 to not always be thinking of more and better and being happy and truly satisfied with where I am and the decisions I've made. Because if I were to just jump ship, it's going to happen in the next relationship. It always does. And so this is the very first one where the Enneagram has shown me the pattern that I've had in the past. I've always left every relationship I was in. And then a lot of times not in the best way, just sort of cut and dry. And that has hurt people. And so I've learned a lot because of the Enneagram, what my pattern was to just take off, because I was afraid of feeling, sadness or anger or any of that. And my type 5 husband is okay with feeling those things, even though he doesn't share them openly all the time. And sometimes I have to ask. But he's not overwhelmed with those things like I am. And so it's a good balance for him to I can rage out. And then he's like, okay, we're good now. Great. Right. And then, to hash it out that way, as opposed to immediately going to, doomsday in our minds as a 7 when it's not sunny and roses.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that doomsday. I feel that. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with that, regardless of your type, maybe on either end, being on the receiving end of that or that person. As we start to close this episode, for anybody, I know we've just scratched the surface of your expertise and your knowledge with relationships and using the Enneagram in those situations. For anybody interested in learning more, where are you hanging out online? Where can we learn more about the services that you offer?
Yeah, so you can find me predominantly on Instagram. My handle is @NoFrillsCoach. And you can sign up for my newsletter there. I send out a couple of emails a week. I love emails. And also on my website, nofrillscoach.com. I help individuals and couples heal, mend, and their relationships if it comes down to that. And then my type 7 is @type7coach, and that is strictly on Instagram.
Okay. I love that. And then is there a book that you would recommend that's either relationship, Enneagram book that has helped you in your journey or with your clients?
Yeah. So The Road Back to You by Cron is a pretty simple, straightforward Enneagram book. So if anyone's new to it, and even if you're a little more advanced, it's such a great refresher. It's a really quick, good read. And it's always really good to have handy for, anything that might pop into your head that you think, I could really use some help with this in my type. You can reference that. And then also for relationships, The State of Affairs by Ester Perel, who's one of my mentors, really turns the way people think of affairs right on its head. And it's eye-opening, and it's insightful for anyone who has been the one to have the affair or be on the receiving ends of that. You really do see affairs in a different way as individual people making choices out of their fears and their own past childhood experiences versus having affairs to, blow up an entire marriage or family.
Okay, talk about juicy. Like all
Mm-hmm.
of her stuff is so interesting. And sometimes it's like, no, that's not right. But then you're like, wow, like interesting. She also has one about captivity, like monogamy, and I forget what that one is called. That was really good too, but such a good one. Okay. And then I'm gonna kind of tailor this to relationships. A lot of times, I hear this term like, oh, just live your best life. And so I ask an individual, like, what does your best life look like? But because we are talking about relationships right now, what would you say, like, is the quote unquote perfect relationship, the ideal relationship in your world? Like, what does that look like for you?
Honestly, learning to be pretty satisfied, feeling calm and really centered. And when I mean that, I mean like an internal body feeling of stillness, because positivity and happiness and creating the feelings of love and all those emotions come easy for me. So for me, the perfect relationship would be one where I feel just calm and peaceful and at home. And if I want to tap into extra happiness, it's right there, readily available. But really, just the peacefulness that a lot of people feel, that for me and as a 7 is hard to. That is my perfect thought of a relationship.
I love that. And then before we go, you have shared so much. Is there anything else, just kind of final words, advice, anything that I haven't asked you about that you would like to share before we call this episode complete?
You haven't shared? I don't think so. I think just a quick recap or a final note on relationships and the Enneagram types in general is the more you know about your past reasons for doing things, the more you understand why you've made the decisions that you've made and where that even came from, the more you really understand that, the better you'll be with your careers, the better you'll be at home, the better you'll be with planning out your future and just your overall everyday, enjoyment and pleasure and satisfaction is really knowing where you came from, why those decisions were made, so that maybe you can continue making them or make some changes.
So good. With that, Natalia, I appreciate you so much, all that you shared, for taking the time to be here, and definitely get connected with her, find her, follow along, learn from her. I always am. I appreciate you, friend. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.